The arrest, which has just been announced about 20 minutes ago, of Farhan Asif in Pakistan for publishing misinformation is a significant development in the broader conversation about the spread of disinformation and of dangerous consequences of the spread of disinformation. Asif's case is a prime example of how unverified or false information, particularly when it involves sensitive issues like immigration and asylum, can rapidly escalate into real-world violence and unrest, particularly if fermented and edged on by Russia Today, Nigel Farage and Andrew Tate. Asif's dissemination of unverified information about an individual arriving, a named individual, got the name wrong, arriving in the UK as an asylum seeker, and the subsequent false identification of this person highlights the precariousness of online narratives. His admission that the publication of the false name was, quote, an error, not intentional, points to a common issue, the temptation to share sensational information without due diligence. And the problem here, of course, is that due diligence isn't always possible because people who are managing their own YouTube channels don't always have access to further information. You see the information, it seems correct, and that makes sense. You check to see whether or not there's two different sources. If there are, off you go. But there's still a possibility of being wrong. Now, an error is certainly possible, but a malicious deceit. And this is the issue. Is this fellow wriggling because he's been caught out, or is this fellow really a person who has been erroneous? The speed and the reach of social media makes it easy for misinformation to gain traction, especially when it aligns with existing prejudice or fear. And the incident further escalated when it was picked up by the larger platforms and figures like RT, Russia Today, Andrew Tate and Nigel Farage, all of whom have access to other information and all of whom should have checked their information. Maybe not so much Andrew Tate, but certainly Farage and Russia Today. They're part of bigger organisations. Farage, the Parliament, and Russia Today, a proper newsroom with substantial followings. And their amplification of this false information underscores the broader network of influence and the role that high-profile figures and individuals can play in legitimising and spreading misinformation. I would hate to see Channel 3, Channel 3 Now, stigmatised and scapegoated for the role played by Russia Today and Nigel Farage, for example. Farage with the simple questions, I would suggest did more damage than, frankly, Channel 3 Now. Channel 3 Now is what you searched for after listening to Farage's questions. But it was Farage who was triggering that that issue. If Channel 3 Now was the weapon, Farage was the person who pulled the trigger, I suggest, with the greatest of restraint and with a lot of allegations running around the place. Farage's responsibility is to promote peace and unity in our country, and that's not what he was doing on that very charge alone. And now he's off in the US, I think, delivering a speech in Arizona for £12,000. What has he done for Clacton? And Clacton will continue voting for him, presumably, because they've already made the stupid mistake once in such numbers. Why are they? Why? It's only a handful of people who write to an MP or who expect to be seen in a surgery, but that handful is how an MP is judged. And I cannot imagine that Farage has set up surgeries, has had surgeries, has written to people who are concerned about specific issues. That is his job. Swanning around, adding to the 90-odd thousand quid that he makes as an MP a year to make an extra 12,000 here, an extra 100,000 in GB News and so on. That's not the job of an MP. That's the job of a wide boy who might just as well be selling second-hand watches in St Trinian. The amplification of false information is, I think, a bigger problem than the production of false information in the first place, and with the greatest of respect to the authorities in Pakistan. It's these actors, Russia Today, Andrew Tate, Farage, knowingly or unknowingly contributing to this echo chamber that magnifies and promotes false narratives with the severe consequences that we saw. Asif's defence was that the mistake was unintentional, and it raises questions about accountability in the digital space. While errors are inevitable, the consequences of such errors in today's interconnected world are profound. And in this case, the false information contributed to riots in Southport, illustrating the tangible harm that arises from online stupidity. And his statement lacks a deeper acknowledgement of the responsibility that comes with sharing information, especially in a context where tensions are already high. So we should have heard him say that he'd got it wrong earlier. It's not right to be saying this now. And the situation exemplifies how disinformation is weaponized by people with their own agendum. The fact that the story was relayed by RT, this network frequently accused of spreading propaganda. I've been on RT. I was interviewed on RT. And while I was waiting for the person to ask me questions, I clearly observed what was going on in the previous interview. So when I got my chance in front of the camera and knew I was relatively live, I tore to pieces the previous piece. Of course, I've never been asked back on, nor would I go. But I can't. I think it's my duty to respond to what I see and to try to correct error if I see it. RT Today is just it's a scurrilous organisation. And like GB News, it had every opportunity of being a great independent broadcasting organ. But Tate and Farage, who further spread the information, or at least raised the questions that led to people searching for that information, an isolated error becomes part of a larger narrative, and it stokes fear, xenophobia, political division, chaos. And this case reflects the broader trends in global disinformation campaigns, not just in accident, where misinformation is not a local issue but part of an international web of influence, and the involvement of media outlets like RT, which has been implicated in disinformation efforts in the past, hints at how state and non-state actors exploit the narratives of chaos to destabilize society, to erode trust in the institutions of order, like the police force, like the law, like the government. And the spread of misinformation across borders complicates the issues slightly, but it is heartening that people can then be identified, arrested, and that Pakistan plays its role in helping Britain to challenge, to address, to rectify error and falsehood. Error? Yes, we can all make errors. To err is human. But to deliberately deceive, that is the issue. And Asif's admission of error might reflect a personal failing, which is symptomatic of the dangerous ecosystem of misinformation, but it might mask his involvement in a much wider web of deliberate deceit, whether he is knowing or unknowing in that. And the incident in Southport is a stark reminder of the power of false information, the urgent need to have more robust mechanisms to verify, to control the dissemination of malicious content. Accountability must extend not only down to individuals like Asif, but up to individuals who are elected to Parliament. It must deal with both ends of that spectrum. Accountability must extend not only down but also up to people who amplify, to project, to disseminate these messages. I was going to say often with very little regard to their consequences, but actually with regard to the consequences, in full knowledge that what they are doing will cause further problems, even if it magnifies their social media revenue, their clickbait. It's about the damage that they do. And the damage in Southport was extreme. This is about racism and evil. And as for the person who had actually been involved, allegedly, in the stabbing, who was a first generation a person from Rwanda, you can't turn around and say, oh yeah, well, he's also part of an immigrant family. Well, so is Suella Braverman, so is Priti Patel. You know, once you are established in this country, once you have citizenship, or you are subject of the crown, you have responsibilities. And it doesn't matter whether you are the person who came into the country or your parents came into the country, you have responsibilities. And the country also has a responsibility. And it's that mutual relationship. And I don't think we should then be looking at, where did your parents come from? Where did your grandparents come from? Where did you come from? Once you have that passport in your hands, everything else goes out of the window. You take responsibility for your actions, and the country takes responsibility for your actions. You can't turn around and say, oh, this is all about foreigners. You can't play the race card to get out of this. And the people who are stirring up that prejudice and that that evil finger jabbing, they need to recognize their responsibility in this discord. We need to promote a society that is anchored in unity, rather than listening to anchors like Mr. Farage or Andrew Tate or Tommy Robinson. That these people are not true. These people are not truly guiding or stabilizing the boat. They're causing disruption. They're causing us to sink.